All right, good morning, coaches. As we go into our final week of the Michigan High School Football Coaches Association online clinic series, today we're with Whiteford High School head football coach Jason Mensing. Thanks, Coach, for taking the time to come on today.
Thanks for having me.
So, as we're recording this, teams are starting to meet back up and do workouts. What does that, the outdoor workouts look like for you in your program?
Yeah, we're establishing all the health checks when students come in. We've got cones set up as the kids come in, and they all establish themselves at a cone that have the social distancing protocol. We've got multiple coaches with clipboards that do the health questionnaire. After they do the health questionnaire, student athlete comes to me and I do the temperature check on them. And then after that, they go out into the field, keeping good social distancing. And then we kind of come together, all going to the elementary arms out circling method to make sure that we keep 6 feet apart. And I do a quick intro at that point. After we do that, we've got 4 stations we're operating under. We've got a agility station. We've got a strength station where we have some equipment outside. Each individual is on the same bar for that, and we're starting with low weight exercises, so things like bicep curls, and we're ending a 10 to 12 exercise routine with high weight exercises like deadlift. So the only exchanges that are occurring is the kid are putting additional weight on their bar. And then when they're done, after the last set, they take the weight off, sanitize the weight, sanitize the bar, and then the next group comes in. Gotcha. We've got a cardio group that is doing long sprint work, basically 200s, 300s, things like that. And then we've got a skill group that's working on fundamental skills. And that group we got to obviously keep under 7. So the order of that, some of those groups are bigger than 7, so the order of that kind of gets a little funky with us keeping 7 there in that skill group.
Sure. So how would you say the kids are responding though to the social distancing, the testing, and all that?
Yeah, number one, they're excited to be together. There's and so are we as coaches. I mean, we're it's been great to be out there and be with them, and as coaches, I think we all get energy from the young people, and to have that back in our lives is a big deal, and it gives you a sense of good feeling and enthusiasm and hope. The young people are doing a great job for the most part, staying apart. There's still that innate desire to want to go give somebody a high five, and conditioning behaviors to do an air high five and things like that is what we're working hard on. I think you can hear a coach yell, keep 6 feet every 13 seconds out there. It's been really emphasized by all of our coaches that that's a priority. Our feeling is we are trying to set and establish the ground rules that may exist in the fall. We want schools to come back, and we want them to be as normal as possible. And we really feel like we have an opportunity right now as football coaches to create an environment that ensures safety, that we can show the rest of the state that we can safely educate kids and come together still in the fall.
Okay, gotcha. So for those that don't know you, could you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of your coaching history?
Yeah. So I was a son of a coach. My dad coached 40 years at the high school and college level. He started out at Bangor and Onstead High School, and then spent most of his career at Adrian College. And so I played at St. Joe's and Adrian College, and then after that, I had the goal of being a college coach, and had some opportunities there. I worked for Mike Gittleson in their strength and conditioning program at U of M as an intern, and was planning on going the GA track. And once we started doing that, I really felt like I had a love for small college football because of the people and the engagement that exists in small college football. So started working that track, and I coached for a year. And while I was doing that, I thought, and I was married, and I thought, coaching high school football seems to have that same type of community relationships, if not more, and could probably be a little more sustainable career path for raising a family. So I student taught then and got a job, and I was a young head coach. I got hired at 23, I think I was, at Addison High School. So I've been a head coach since then, with the exception of 1 year. There was 1 year I coached at Siena Heights University. I've been a head coach at 5 different high schools. One of the things that, other than Addison, all of them had losing records when we got there. So we got positions that were kind of turnaround situations. And I think that probably fits my personality. I like going into places where maybe there's a lack of belief or maybe some inspiration that's needed, and try to come and bring a sense of enthusiasm and hope to everybody. So we've done that in the last going on 9 years here. I've been at Whiteford High School, and we've had a pretty good run, and I had a great experience. I've had met so many great families, and this has really become our home. And my plan is to hopefully stay here until I can retire in 4 or 5 years.
Gotcha. So you mentioned, that at your various stops that each of them were losing programs before you and your staff arrived. What would you say is probably the number one thing you and your staff did to ultimately change the culture?
Yeah, I think number one, there's some different phases that we really believe in. We believe that there's an element of schematics to what we do. We believe there's an element of strength and conditioning that we do. We believe there's an element of recruiting and retention of what we do. And then we would believe in our culture. So those are kind of the pillars of what we build around. And our culture, our goal, whenever we walk into a place, the first thing we do in our first meeting is say, we want football to be fun. And we want this to be something that you enjoy. And we try to create an environment that is enticing to teenage boys, which in our mind is number one, an environment where they feel like they can be vulnerable. We feel like when teenage boys can be themselves, that they're going to have a lot more enjoyable experience. I've seen a lot of coaches want to create environments where they're almost robotic. And in certain phases, maybe I did that as well. But ultimately, we feel like we want each boy to be themselves and be able to be completely free in who they are, because we feel like we get a lot more energy and excitement out of them. When that ties to the weight room and your physical training and those components, which obviously we're big believers in strength and conditioning and the development of people, development of young people, they're both mind and body. I think that the mind is the body is 4 is to 1. So we believe that mental development and how they approach hard things is far more significant than the physical component. We believe that by investing in the psychological parts of it, the physical part almost takes care of itself. But I would describe our weight room culture almost, our goal is the imagery of a rock concert. Obviously, we don't quite get to that level, but we want to create an environment where there's just a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of encouragement and a lot of excitement. So, and then the recruitment and retention phase of it, the things that we believe in there is number one, to be highly inclusive, to create an environment where there's an encouragement from the top down. There's a big belief for us that the seniors have to develop a big brother relationship to the younger kids, and having an environment that's inclusive and not one that's pushing people away. And then we never close a door. There are young people who say they may not want to play anymore or whatnot. We keep that door open. We make sure that we show love. We never are spiteful for a kid making that decision, because ultimately we found that many times a kid may take a year where he doesn't play, or he may feel that way for a month or two, and then he feels differently a month later. And we want to make sure that our relationship's based on trust with that young person and us connecting, and not whether they're playing football or not. And then the schematics, I think the schematics is significant in the standpoint of we have a philosophy and we teach to that philosophy, and that philosophy really hasn't changed. So our staff that's been together now for 14 years have been teaching the same fundamentals year after year after year. And as a group, they have varying passions. They have varying level of football knowledge even. But after spending 14 or 15 years working on mastering specific fundamentals, I think you get pretty good at teaching those things. And so because of that, we have a tremendous staff.
And, in speaking to your staff, what advice would you have for coaches? Maybe, a new head coach, what advice do you have for them as they're assembling a staff?
Yeah, I'd say, and that's a great question, because I think one of the flaws that probably a younger me made, and I think a lot of other guys do, is we're chronically out there looking for the next Vince in the party. We're looking for that guy that can be an awesome coach, and we can never find enough of them. And I think what we have to do is we have to find people that are great with young people. We have to find people that have a passion to help and build relationships. And then we have to get them in a role that they can do. So all of our coaches have a different capability and different strength or weakness. So we have coaches that are very good position coaches that may not understand the whole scheme. They may just be very good at teaching base fundamentals. Or we have other guys that start with us that maybe don't have a whole lot of knowledge in football at all. And that's okay if we can identify a spot to put them and work with them to master that task, just like you would with a player, and then watch them develop as time goes on. Now, the flip side of that, when we get somebody who has a tremendous talent and a tremendous knowledge of the game, you have to empower those people. So again, a younger me and a lot of other people I know will get people with a lot of skill, and they won't want to give up that control. And because they don't want to give up that control, those people who have that high level skill don't really want to coach for them, because if you've got a great ability like that, you want to be empowered to use that talent that you have. So it's a matter of recognizing the people you have, the skills that they have, and then getting them in a placement that they can be successful. If you hire great people first, which everyone always says that, but it's tougher to do than say, you never have a problem with egos. And if you hire people that have huge egos, you're always going to have problems. So, the group of guys I've got are unbelievable. They have various levels of experience, talent, interest in the game, but they all bring different qualities, and every single one of them loves kids, loves helping kids, and they don't have egos. So it's a great group.
What sort of professional development do you do with your staff?
Yeah, so it's interesting because back in the day, I used to have all of us come in and we'd clinic and we'd meet, and I really had a lot of accountability, a lot of expectation for them. Now I have very little expectation, and the performance has increased drastically because it's done on their accord versus mine. So it's not me forcing them to do things that they don't really want to do. It's more them reaching out to me to make sure that they're prepared. So what it looks like is this for us. Obviously, after the season's done, we go to the Coach Association clinic. That's more for us about coming together as a community, as coaches. Obviously, the clinics are great, but being a community of coaches in Michigan, I think is a big priority. I may have 2 or 3 guys go to that. Typically, they're the guys who've been former head coaches and whatnot. We'll have in January or so, we'll start having impromptu group texts or minor meetings on things that we're looking at adjusting. And they're usually just, hey, I had this idea. And it could come from anybody. The defensive line coach may talk about the offense. Hey, I'm thinking about this. And we just throw ideas kind of at each other. And then in March, we do a retreat. We go away for a 3-day weekend, and we dig into the meat and potato of every fundamental that we work on. So we'll take our offensive line play and we'll break it down step by step, play by play, with just the guys that are going to be involved with the offensive line. We're not going to bog down the defensive backs coaches with that material, just the guys. But we're all together for 3 days. We have breakout sessions in there. We do walkthroughs. We do it at a cabin, one of the guys' cabin, and then we have great fellowship as well. After that's done, at the last day of that, I always tell the staff, now from here on out, it's your job to be prepared. I'll meet with you at any time. I'll meet with you as much as you need to, but it's your job to be prepared. That retreat, we bring everybody, 7th grade through 12th grade. We've brought youth coaches with us. Anybody that we trust as part of the inner circle are welcome to attend.
Yeah, and speaking on youth football, there's various schools of thought, on when football should start. From your experiences, what's your philosophy on having a successful youth football program?
Yeah, so when I got to Whiteford, Mike Lee was running the youth program here, and he was doing a great job. I think he ran it for 17 or 18 years. And he did a great job of really teaching the game and getting kids interested in football. When we first got here, one of the things that we kind of changed the perspective on was that they were in a very competitive league. They were really fighting for wins, and at that time, which I totally respect, if I'm going to coach football, I want to win games. I can respect a youth coach having the same desire as that. So we kind of altered that philosophy a little bit to make it more about participation, thinning out the rosters, getting a few less kids on the team so more kids were playing, and that type of thing. Mike did a great job with that, and Whiteford High School, we've got 110 boys in our high school, and in the last 8 years, we've had 2 middle school teams, 7 of the years. Once we kind of changed that philosophy, so we've ensured that we've had enough participants, which has a huge impact all the way up to the program. Last year, Mike was stepping down from that position, and we made the move to flag football. So we are now playing flag football through 6th grade. In my opinion, that's the most age appropriate. Excuse me. I believe that those younger kids, they want to play, they want to have fun, they want to be engaged with the game, but most of them aren't ready for contact yet.
Sure. As a head coach, one area we all have to deal with, whether we like it or not, is fundraising. So what have been some of the more successful fundraisers you have done throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, we do the card sale that I think most people do. We've done the a golf outing. I think a golf outing is a great event. If you've got some people that have an interest in kind of leading that for you, I don't think it's a great event if you're doing it all yourself. And then our camp, everywhere we've been, we've recruited lots of bodies and lots of kids to our youth camp. We kind of make that a big deal. We've had over 200 kids at our youth camp in certain years, and it's seemingly always 150 kids. So, but it takes a lot of effort to build that enthusiasm for it, and it's been a pretty good fundraiser for us based on all that extra investment that we do to try to get kids there.
Sure, right. How about this? So, for in the coaching profession, it's kind of inevitable that most of us are going to change jobs at some point, whether it be, for teaching or coaching. But what advice do you have for coaches who are in a state of transition, or they may have recently made a transition to a new position as either an assistant coach or a head coach?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because in my experience, I didn't detail this, but I went back to my hometown, and after my 4th year there, I was fired there. So I've gotten the taste of being on the top of the mountain and winning a state title, and also on the bottom of the heap and being told that I'm not wanted anymore, which is a tough thing to go through, and it's an emotional thing to go through. I think the biggest thing is always have a perspective of onward and upward. Even when I was going through that experience, I remember having that chronic thought of, God's got a great plan for me. I don't know what that is. It's not up to me to decide. And just because I want what I had, it doesn't mean that plan for the future isn't better. And, what God's plan is for me is far better than what my plans are for me. And Lord knows I've had many, and I've had many not work. And when I can step back and just trust that I'm going through this hardship for a reason, and this is going to make me a better man, this is going to make me a better coach, hopefully this makes me a better husband and a father, it's worth it in time, and I need to be patient for that time. So I think that's the biggest thing. I frankly don't understand, and I'm sure there are a lot of great coaches out there that aren't Christians and have different belief systems, and I totally respect that. But without my faith, I'm not sure I could do this vocation, because it is a tough vocation, and we go through lots of trials in it. And it's that's the thing that we've always fallen back on when we've hit those roadblocks. But yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question or not, but that's my belief.
It's good. I agree. So, what do you think is one area of building a successful high school football program that is often overlooked?
Yeah, I think a broader answer before I get into the specific there is I think having those pillars that I talked about at the beginning and having these foundational beliefs of our program and our philosophy, I think sometimes gets lost. I think a lot of times folks may focus on one of those over the other three, or they may not have those pillars established of what are those 3 to 5 things that we have to master if we're going to have a good program. I think a lot of times folks may, everything's about strength and conditioning. I've seen guys that their whole focus is on strength and conditioning, and they may neglect some of those other areas that are culture builder or schematic or whatnot, and vice versa. There's guys that invest completely in schematics and they become experts and they're fantastic at running the magic play that'll work, but their kids can't stand them, or they don't have a strength program, or some other. So I think making sure that there's balance in all of your pillars of your program is a critical element that takes time to develop as a head coach.
Okay.
That's number one. But number two, I think, and again, I want to get a little more specific, that I think matters even more, is that our experience as head coaches and our role as head coaches is to provide the best experience that we can for every kid in our program. We are educators. That's what we are. And I think oftentimes that we lose focus on that, or we can lose focus on that, and worry too much maybe about outcome, or maybe worry too much about the development of our elite personnel versus maybe some of our non-elite personnel, maybe some of our boys that aren't very talented, David. And our job isn't to go coach up the best player, and our job isn't to win games. Those things, the elite player becoming even better, or us winning games, is a byproduct of our process of educating each player and each coach to our best ability holistically. We do those things, and the results kind of take care of themselves. And it's hard to keep that focus when you're in the heat of battle and you're preparing for a game. It's easy to get that focus to turn to what do we need to do to win today, or maybe I'm going to neglect some players today because I want to win this week. It's easy for that focus to alter. And I really, really believe that the more holistic focus we can have on all individuals involved in the program, not just the players either, the parents, which nobody likes to bring the parents in, but our relationships with the parents matter, and the other coaches, the more holistic we can be to build that community, I think the better results we all end up having. And I think that's something that I don't know that a lot of head coaches think that deeply at that type of thing.
Well, something you just touched on, and is, I guess, how do you go about developing a good, positive relationship with the parents?
Yeah, that starts with vulnerability. All relationships, and I don't care if it's a relationship with another adult or a student, it's the same, is built around trust. And if you're unwilling to be vulnerable in front of your parents, if you're not willing to be honest and be yourself to your parents, they're not going to have genuine trust for you. And obviously, some people take advantage of you when you do that, and it's good to know that, though. That's a positive thing to know, that you have somebody that you might not be able to trust within your program, even if it is a parent. But I think all relationships are built on trust. All trust is built through one being able to be vulnerable with one another, and then time that builds relationship. I think the biggest challenge, when I think of my past, when I haven't been as good at that in certain situations with people, it's always been because I've had a guard up. So when I look at my failures in that role, it always ties back to periods of my life where I had a guard up with certain people or a group of people. And when that guard came down and I was willing to be vulnerable and let people know that I'm just trying to be the best I can, that trust gets developed. And then everybody starts pulling that rope the same direction, because we're all trying to achieve the same thing together. And they're not looking at me as the head football coach who's trying to be perfect for the community and their kids. They're looking at me as Jason, the guy who's trying to help their kids be better.
Good. So, you mentioned earlier, you kind of been on both ends of the spectrum of this, but what advice do you have for coaches who are taking over a struggling program?
Yeah, so again, we've done this a couple times. Grayling, when we took the Grayling job, it won one game in 3 years. Owasso had one winning season in forever, and Tecumseh, when we got there, they had won 2 games the 2 previous years, and we're 2-16 coming in. And Grayling, we went 8-3 our first year, and Owasso, we had one of their better years in my second year there. And then Tecumseh, we had a playoff team the first year. When I came to Whiteford, they were 4-5, and we ended up having an 8-2 season the first year. So we've walked into that element a lot. And I think the initial thing that matters most out of anything is generating enthusiasm. And that enthusiasm is it's got to be something that inflects the players. Ultimately, if you're in one of these programs that isn't having a lot of success, football isn't a lot of fun. You know, it's hard to go 1-8 2 years in a row and say, man, football is great. And what happens then is, you know, you start losing, and it's not fun to win. You know, winning and losing isn't fun at that point. So then kids start looking for what they can get out of the experience. So things become a lot more individual based, and it's simple. It makes sense. It's the psychology of it. You know, if my team's not going to have success and I'm not going to have fun in winning games, then I'm going to start looking to have success for my own and be successful myself, so that I can get something out of this and I can feel rewarded for this investment I'm making. A lot of times I'll hear coaches then come back from that experience and state, well, if we weren't so selfish, we would be better. And it's kind of a chicken or egg thing. It's not really about the young person being selfish. What it's about is them buying into this concept that we're going to be better together and you're going to achieve what you want. So again, it starts with that, okay, infectious enthusiasm. Let's go do great things. Let's go do things that haven't been done before. And then the next step is to identify what each individual on the team wants. Why are you still playing? You've won 1 game in 2 years, and you're still playing. So there's something you want out of this experience. So once you understand the psychology of what that young person wants out of their experience, and you can tie what each of them want together for a common good, now you understand what it takes to build. So when you know that wide receiver wants to catch balls and be sweet and play college football, and that offensive lineman really hates the wide receiver for thinking that way, but at the same time, he wants to be first team All-State because he's a big, strong kid, and he wants to be – those 2 goals are more alike than different, even though they may not be on the same page. So, all right, let's help you guys achieve that. Let's go do that. And how we're going to do that is we're going to have this common philosophy and this common bring us together and build it around that. So I think that's the big thing, is you bring in that initial enthusiasm, and then you find out why kids are playing, what they're trying to get out of the experience, and you tie all those goals, because that's all that is individual goals. It's not kids being selfish. It's them having individual goals. And you tie that together for your team goal. And you built your initial team goals around that, not around winning and losing, around accomplishing those individual feats.
Now, on the flip side of that, how about advice for coaches who might be under a little bit of constant pressure to maintain a championship caliber program? You know, they're in that tradition-rich program all the time.
Yeah, which is a wholly different framework. And quite frankly, and we've been in that seat as well, of course, but that, quite frankly, isn't quite as fun. Because the climb of the mountain, those steps and those gains, you can see quickly. And you can see your team come together, and you can see them learn new skills. When you're at the top of the mountain and you're winning a lot of games, and you're probably having a lot of blowouts at that point, and you're getting some running clocks and things like that, now it's more about maintaining focus. And the focus has to be on, the development of yourself, development of your own team, your development on the individual goals. It's the same thing, but it becomes a lot more finite. And the growth from that is hard to see sometimes, because week in and week out, if you've got a couple running clock games in a row, all of a sudden, you still have to develop and grow in that, and the focus can't be based around the result of the game. So it all ties the same. It's the same element. I would say the only difference is when you guys are a team that's winning a lot of game, or like you guys are this year, going to try to repeat a state championship, the targets and the goals have to become really, really finite. We are going to get better at this week. And it's not tied to the result of the game, because you're going to beat that team you play this week probably, but you have these 2 or 3 targets. And that's actually what we did in both 16 and 17, is every single week I had every position coach give me their 3 goals, their finite goals that they were going to improve on each week. And then we assessed those position coaches on were we successful or not. And so our goals were never tied to results at that point, because we were at that point a little more experienced, a little deeper than some of our opponents. So that allowed us to have success on Friday, regardless if we're improving or not.
Sure. What advice do you have for those assistant coaches that may be watching this that have aspirations of being a head football coach one day?
Yeah, don't be in a hurry. It's hard to say that, because I think every assistant coach who wants to be a head coach is in a hurry. I think of my 20s, and I certainly had some good head coaching years in the 20s, in my 20s. But I look back on it and I think about maybe leaving the kids a little bit short because of where I'm at now compared to them. I've come a long way in 20 years, and I hope to keep going for the next 20 years. But I look back, and if I knew then what I know now, I would have been a lot better coach to some of those kids. So I think, being patient. I was an assistant for Kevin Orman at Onstead. And then, of course, I coached for Jim Lyle at Adrian College. And those 2 guys were tremendous mentors. So a lot of the things I learned to be a head coach came from the experience there. I think that is critical for anybody who wants to be a head coach. If you haven't worked for somebody that truly understands education, truly understands young people, truly understands motivation, inspiration, you're not ready. You've got to see it. You've got to see how they do it, because it's not the same image that you have in your head. I think all of us have this image in our head of what it looks like, but it's not the same image that's in our head, the actual application of it. So working for Kevin, working for Jim, absolutely prepared me to be a head coach. Some of the other areas I needed growth in that didn't tie with that student relationship. Some of the areas of building relationships with parents I needed more growth in. Some of the areas in schematics, I had some good understanding of it, but not at the level I know now. Areas in strength and conditioning, I had a decent strength and conditioning program, but not to the level now. The understanding of culture, I was like most young guys, fired up and wanting to show that we were going to be the toughest team in America. As time's gone on, I've learned that that's not the best process. So I think that both of those elements are key. I do know that most of those young assistants aren't going to be patient. So go work for somebody that's really good, who really understands young people. They may not be schematic experts, but they understand young people and they're great educators. They're going to prepare you more than anybody else.
Okay, good. So what are some of your strategies in building and retaining numbers in a small high school football program?
Yeah, by the way, I think it's easier in a smaller school versus a large school as far as building relationships and retaining students, because those tie directly together. However, I think there's some great processes you can put together in that work in both. So specifically with small school, there's a recognition that your kids have been together forever. They know each other. The relationships are there. Knowing that who those natural leaders in each group are is a really, really important thing as far as retaining numbers. You also have to be able to build a relationship with those kids and their parents in a small school setting, because they're going to know you. You're going to be around them enough from a young age. And this is actually one of my favorite things about being in a small school is I know our 7th graders. I know our 8th graders. I know their parents. I can call them if I've got a concern or if I'm excited about something. And that's a neat thing, because you get to see a growth pattern from a really young child to a near manhood. And that's a deep relationship that in a small school, without question, that's the most important thing, is that you have those genuine relationships. Large school, that's hugely important as well. But I think one of the critical elements there is now that some of that marketing becomes much more significant. And at both large and small schools, we've done a pep rally to initiate signups. Right off of that, we immediately send out a mailing to the home saying that your child, we do a sign up at the pep rally, and then we send that mailing to anybody who signs up, that your child has shown interest in football, and here are all the important dates. Here's your camp information. And by getting that flyer home immediately, then the parent says, oh, great, my son's not going to participate in this program, and you get things moving. So that communication process at any size school and how you build the enthusiasm to get initial signups has a huge impact in your numbers and the sustainability of those numbers. When we got to Tecumseh High School, we had 22 varsity football players our first year there. And we had 70 kids in our 9 through 12 program. And in my last year there, we were up over 120 kids. And it was a drastic change. And it was all because of these systems that were put in place, both in youth programs and communication.
And speaking, you talked about identifying leaders. Is there anything you do to, I guess, help build the leadership in your kids?
So, first off, I am a believer that not everybody has the desire or aptitude even to be a leader. That we're not all leaders. The nature of football, we're going to have more leaders than we do in other activities. Ultimately, it's a grueling game. It's a physical game. It's a game that takes a lot of energy. Naturally, we're going to draw out some of the harder workers that are in our school systems to participate. I think that it's critical that you identify the strengths of any young person. And when you identify those strengths, those are the attributes that you're going to ultimately help them grow in. You also have to make sure that we're aware of our weaknesses. So when we have a young person that has an aptitude to be a great leader, it's critical for us to put them in leadership positions. We don't want to speak for them. We want them to speak for us. And flipping that dynamic of getting those guys to truly lead because they have that aptitude is really important. We say every year that it's the seniors team. It's not the coaches team. We're going to coach for 40 years. The seniors get one senior year. So it's the seniors team. So once we identify our captains, which we have a player vote for that, we start having meetings, the captains and myself start having meetings talking about leadership because they've been chosen by their peers as the leaders. So at that point, we start having these weekly conversations about what leadership looks like, the challenges of leadership, the judgment that they're going to face. And we, again, build a genuine relationship that allows dialogue and discussion, openness, so that we know what's going on. So there's not a culture that we have to hide things from coach, but there's a culture of we can tell anything to coach. And then I help guide them into handling those situations because we obviously we want our kids to handle those situations within the program. We don't want to handle it at a coaching level. So I think some of those are steps that we probably have in place that accomplish that.
And this will be the last question, but as we're sitting here in early June, and this will post in early June, I guess what advice do you have for coaches as we're going to be navigating a different, some what none of us have ever experienced before? What's your advice for coaches as we go into these next 2-3 months of different? It's just going to be different, as we prepare for the season.
So number one, follow the guidelines. Whatever guidelines we've gotten, we need to follow. So there's a 10,000 political opinions on COVID-19. And when we allow our opinions and views to infuse our community and programs, we're doing a disservice to our young people. We coach a game that has rules. We follow those rules. And when the state or the national federation or our league is giving us guidelines, it's critical that we are responsible leaders and follow the guidelines that are given. I said to our kids on our first workout day, there's 1,000 people with cameras everywhere, and they're all going to take a picture. They're going to drive by and they're going to take a picture. And I want to never worry about what's in that picture because I want us always doing the right thing. I want us always following the guidelines that we've been given. And we can complain about it, but what good does that do? Get the guidelines and follow it. And then you have nothing to hide. You have nothing to be unwilling to share about because you're doing your best that you can in following those procedures. So that'd be the first thing I would say. Number two, engage people. Football right now is as important as ever. In our current world, with social injustice and the protests that are going on there, I vividly remember my offensive lineman that I played in college. We had a black guy from Detroit We had a Jewish guy from Birmingham. We had a guy from Taylor that was just a tough, unusual guy. We had a guy from Dearborn that was a Muslim. We had me that was a Christian. We had a diverse group of people, and we all fought for each other, and we all loved one another, and we all, it didn't matter well, that's what football does, is it brings people together for a common cause, and that common cause being our sport. So with COVID and the health concerns that are in my mind, with kids being absent and away from activity and not socialization and having those opportunities in football, and our current, concerns of the world with the protests and social injustice, and trying to ensure that we have a world where everyone feels valued. Football is more important than ever. So as coaches, we have the responsibility to make sure this game continues. And it's not going to continue if we look for shortcuts or we look to try to find ways around rules. We're only going to have more opportunity if we do things the right way. So you don't have to like it, but follow it and do what's right for each of us. And let's try to help young people.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on and do a clinic for the Coaches Association. And obviously, I wish you the best of luck this upcoming season.
Coach, thank you, and thank you for having me.
All right, take care.